I'm testing the microphone. Can the people in the back hear me? Cool. This thing is really heavy and I'm used to moving around, and this is gonna swallow me whole because I'm only 5 feet tall. So I don't really want to stand behind here if I don't have to. So forgive me for any weird movements or anything like that. So welcome. I have been an introvert my entire life. You will definitely hear more about that as we get going. But over time, I have learned that my voice has value and how to use it and how to show up. And that's what brings me to actually speak at these conferences, which I never would have imagined doing in my entire life. So I'm very excited to be here with you guys today and share all of the experiences. And I was just telling the front row, all of these plants are making me so happy. All of this greenery and smiling faces, it's the perfect session of the day. Hopefully my clicker works. Last time I didn't charge it and it was dead the whole time. So here we go. What were you afraid of when you were a kid? Maybe you were afraid of the dark. I hated going to bed at night because some monster was going to yank me in the middle of the night and I was going to be dead. So I would just pray, just give me one more day, 24 hours, and let me live. Maybe you were afraid of spiders. Those little 8-legged things, they look so much better with hats on. Who knows? I saw some hands go up for that one. Maybe you're afraid of clowns. They're kind of creepy and they do weird things, especially if you've watched Stephen King's It. Highly recommend / do not recommend. The end is a cop-out. That's my professional opinion. Or maybe, like Fred Savage in The Princess Bride, you were absolutely terrified of Grandpa pinching your cheeks. Whatever it was you were afraid of, anytime you thought about these things, you would start donning your emotional armor to buffer against whatever that thing was. For me, the thing that I was terrified the most was this: a server coming up to the table, asking me what I wanted to eat. Now, it's normal for a kid to be nervous and not really know how to speak up. And this should have been a moment of joy, and it should have been really easy because the only things I ate as a kid were chicken tenders and mashed potatoes. So I should have been overjoyed to announce my order. It wasn't complicated, it wasn't fancy, it didn't need special instructions, and I loved those things. But for some reason, I just could not speak up. I would have to very carefully tell my mom what I wanted and whisper it to her so that the server couldn't hear me, because if the server can hear me, I might as well just ask the server, and that is not happening. So I would tell my mom would tell the server, and we would go on our merry way. You would think for a kid that's normal, sure, if you're 5 or 6 years old. My poor, patient, ever-loving mother ordered for me until I was a teenager. It didn't help that the one time I decided to be brave, it completely backfired. We had gone to this Chinese food restaurant. It was right up the street from our house. We ordered our meals, we had a good time, and I noticed the water at the table was getting low. Now, the rest of the meal was finished, but I was feeling particularly brave and confident that day. So I flagged the waiter down and I said, "Hey, can we get some more water, please?" I was very polite. He was very happy to go get the water. And I started doing this internal little dance of joy, like, finally I did it. I could speak up for myself. And then my parents said, "We're just about to leave." I felt so dumb. I was full of shame and embarrassment. How could I possibly not have noticed he was about to bring us the check and we were about to get in the car and go? Of course we don't need water. How could I be so stupid? And I vowed in that moment I would never speak up again. This made school particularly difficult. I didn't like answering questions. The only time I liked answering them was if I knew I had the right answer. Kids at school thought I was a know-it-all, so I didn't really have a lot of friends to hang out with. But what I wish they had known was, the only thing I knew with certainty was that I could not answer something wrong in class or I would absolutely die of embarrassment. So it made for a pretty lonesome childhood. I don't know if I would particularly say lonely. I spent a lot of time in my yard, dancing, singing about my future husband that I don't know, I was 12 at the time, so who could have known that would have been? And reading a lot of books. In books, it's great because you get to follow the characters and be in their stories, and you are involved in literally everything. In real life, I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. I just felt like whatever it was that I had to say, it wasn't important. It didn't have value. Nobody was going to listen to me anyway. So I stayed quiet for a really long time. But it didn't last forever. I had all of these thoughts and these ideas and things I wanted to share just bubbling up. Now, fun fact, I was born in Hawaii, and I think, clearly not Hawaiian, by the way, just born there. And I think I just have this intrinsic connection with volcanoes, and all of this bubbling stuff just came up and erupted one day. Now, at first, I wasn't having a lot of impact. I was a rather silent volcano. And I think the saying is, if a volcano erupts in the woods and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? So I wasn't really having a lot of impact. But as I started stepping into that voice and gaining confidence and getting feedback from people and tweaking things here and there and really feeling more sure of myself, that voice grew more powerful over time. And here I am sharing this message with all of you today. I believe very strongly in a couple of things. One, that you have dreams that you absolutely can achieve, 150%. And your connections will help get you there. I clearly did not get here by myself. It takes a lot of people to make success, whether that's Edith handing out the handouts for me at the door, the people who put this conference together, people who gave me feedback from this presentation that I've done previously. But it takes a village, and it is 150% worth it. So as a little more formal introduction, my name is Audrey. My last name is technically Mickelson, but I'm getting married in September, and I like his name way better. So my name is Audrey Kramer. I'm an admin assistant with the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration Office, a very fancy title. I have my master's degree in counseling psychology. I'm a certified coach. I recently just published a book. I do speaking outside of the university, and I'm a crazy cat lady. It's the best way to be. And I really believe that all of these connections that we have are the things that are going to lift you up to your success. And the best way to achieve your dreams is to use your voice to help you get there. So I'm hoping that some of the things that I share with you today will be helpful to you. And if they are, use them, take them, share them with the entire world. And I would be really happy with that. Before we talk about what gets in the way, there's a little spot on your handout that asks you what dreams you have, big or small. You could have really huge dreams like moving to Paris or creating a little cat rescue sanctuary, which, okay, those are my dreams. Or they could be small dreams like creating a backyard oasis full of flowers and hummingbirds and butterflies. Those are also my dreams. But if you want to take a second to jot down some of your own before we get into the nitty-gritty, even putting it down on paper is huge and powerful. I went to a gathering once where we wrote down dreams, and several years later, I looked back and realized I had actually accomplished some of those. So just writing it down is a huge first step. And I realize I'm going back and forth. So if you ever can't hear me, just be like, hey, we can't hear you. Cool. Lots of good scribbling. I love it. You guys have lots of dreams. This is amazing. I'm seeing pens just flying across the page. If you're writing, keep writing. But I do want to talk a little bit about what gets in the way of us using our voice to achieve our dreams. For me, I had a lot of reasons that I stayed silent. I figured everyone already knows what I know. I went to an administrative professionals conference in Colorado last October. And I went to a session, and as the speaker was speaking, I was going, this is common knowledge. Everybody knows this. And then I looked over to my left, and there's a young woman fervently scribbling on a piece of paper like she had never heard this before in her whole life, and she probably hadn't. But my assumption was, well, if everybody knows this, I don't need to speak up and say anything about it. But you never know who doesn't know what you know, if that's confusing enough. I also thought no one wants to hear me. I'm the short, petite, little 5-foot thing and can be seen as feisty, but also a lot of times I would speak up and just be ignored or discounted, or why would you say that? You're just trying to be a naysayer, all of those types of things. So I just figured nobody cared about what I had to say. I also, as a neurodivergent person, have a fear of being perceived. So if I am in control of where I am in the room and whether or not I'm seen, that's a great thing. But if you send me to a party where I don't have a specific role as the person welcoming people or in the kitchen putting things together, you will find me with my ukulele in the corner, and you can come talk to me if you want to, but I am not going to make myself the life of the party. I also used to go to the shopping mall and I would feel really nauseous shopping around for clothes, and I couldn't figure for the life of me what it was until I realized one day, I think everyone in the shopping mall is looking at me and judging me for what I'm wearing and how I'm walking and the things that I'm carrying. And I thought about it for a minute and realized nobody even sees me. They're all too busy worrying about their own thing. But that fear of perception of that spotlight that I did not ask for was enough for me to not ever want to speak up. And also having to be perfect. This is a very, very common thing. And we get told a lot, you have to look a certain way. I noticed most of the women speakers today have heels on, and that's like an image of success and perfection. And I gave that up a couple of years ago, and I'm not going to pick it back up again. But you get told to speak in a certain way. You can't use ums, ers, ahs. Don't start sentences with buts or ands or so's, which you can totally start a sentence with so, by the way. I looked it up. But we get told all of these things about how we're supposed to look when we present a message. We have to use the right language. We have to look a certain way. And for me, I didn't feel like I fit that, so I didn't want to speak up. Now, since we're at a Women in Leadership conference, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the very specific things that women face when we are challenged with speaking up. One of those things are the expectations about being polite. We can't be assertive, we have to be passive. But men can be aggressive, and that's perfectly fine. It's assumed we're the coffee getters. I recently just rewatched Legally Blonde, and one of the female attorneys was asked to go get the coffee while the men worked on the case. That's a very common thing. Anne Hathaway did it too in The Intern, or not The Intern. Oh, it wasn't even Anne Hathaway, it was Anna Kendrick in Pitch Perfect. She was grabbing all the coffee instead of doing the actual work of mixing the music. We get assumed that we don't know as much, even if we know more. And I've realized this with myself, that every time that I work with a woman provider, I am so grateful for her knowledge and attention to detail and empathy and care. But I prefer to have a male provider, even though I know I'm going to get better service with a woman. So I've started changing that narrative in my own head, because that makes a really big difference as well. And we have to fight twice as hard to be seen. Mine's because of my height, but it could be for a variety of other reasons. And I'm sure you guys have also had experiences as women that say, I'm not allowed to speak up because X, Y, Z. So if any of you have thoughts that you want to share on that, I would love to add it to the list. Going once, going twice. Sold to the clicker. Excellent. Now, I do want to have opportunity for you guys to share with each other, because I think that this is very deeply important to understand why we do the things that we do and why we hold ourselves back, or what we feel like is holding us back. So we'll take about 5 minutes, and you can either partner up or get in a group of 3 or whatever works best. And you can either answer the top question or the bottom. You do not have to answer both. I don't know what just happened there. So what messages have you received about how you should speak? Or reflect on a time that you wanted to speak up and didn't, and what was it that held you back? So we'll do about 2.5 minutes, and then I'll come on the mic and say switch, and then the other person goes, and then we'll come back after that and have some small reflection. So talk amongst yourselves. My joke is, one of these days I'm gonna do like the beginning of Ice Ice Baby, where I'm just like, stop, collaborate and listen, Ice is back. But I don't know enough of the lyrics to do that, but it was very effective. You guys had some amazing conversations. I'm so sad to break you away from it, but I'm also a very nosy and curious person. So were there any like aha moments or this totally resonated with me? Anybody willing to share? Sharing is caring. Crickets, we are all ready to go. Ooh, 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 yes, go for it.
I know, so uncomfortable with doing that right now too.
Oh,
so perfect.
Yes, wonderful.
I shared a situation in a meeting that I was at with a lot of people who were far above me. I'm not at UW, I'm at an engineering company. And it was, VPs, line managers, people who were well above me, and I had only been in my role as a manager for a couple of months. Mm-hmm. And I finally felt I had something to contribute to the conversation. And I tried at several different points to break in, but it was a room of all men and one other female in the room. So it was like really hard because I felt like a lot of the men would just start talking or not notice I was trying to say something.
Yeah.
And it was actually the COO, who was a woman, who said, actually, I think Sarah has something that she'd like to share. And I don't know if I would have been able to break through at that stage where I was.
Yeah.
And it made me feel very empowered. Since then, I've kind of developed some techniques and stuff where instead of feeling like I just come out with what I'm going to say, I use some of those things you mentioned, like so's to kind of make it clear I'm about to say something, to try to get the floor a little bit before I just start saying it. It makes me feel a little comfortable with it and almost gets you in there. And if you start talking at the same time, you can kind of back off and then try again.
It does make it a little more comfortable. So in case you couldn't hear that in the back, being in a room full of men who are like high-level executives and you've been in management for a couple of months and maybe don't feel comfortable speaking, kind of using those uhs and ers and ums to get yourself wedged in there so they realize something is happening and it hasn't been that your message has already gone by. But another really big piece that you brought up was having an ally in the room. Whether that's another woman who's in a high position of power or having a male ally who can step up and say, oh, I think Sarah was trying to talk. She had a really great idea. I want to make sure everyone hears this. So you don't have to feel like you are in charge of your own power and nobody else can help you with that. But that is a shared responsibility between everyone in the room. And sometimes those relationships aren't cultivated in the moment. They're cultivated outside of those meetings and offices. So I'm so glad that you shared that. It reminded me of another quote that I did want to share with you today, and I'm going to do it early because this is good timing for it, especially because she was nervous to share. So can we all give Sarah a round of applause because that was really brave. And now I've thoroughly embarrassed her. It's great. But His Holiness the Dalai Lama mentioned in his book, The Art of Happiness, a note, and I know this isn't an exact quote, but you are no more important than anybody else, but you're no less important either. I served in the military for a little bit, which I'll get into, I think, later. But that was the biggest thing of realizing we're all just people and we're all just here doing our jobs. And just because he's a sergeant major and I'm a corporal doesn't mean I don't have the right to say anything. So don't feel like you're less important just by position or title or age or any of that. You are equally as important as any other human in the room. That was very good. Anybody else want to share? That was incredible. Cool. We're ready to go to the ice cream shop after this, I can tell. All right, so let's talk a little bit about finding your voice. I did not go from silent to speaker, obviously, overnight. I spent a lot of time as a kid being involved in theater and chorus and band and all of those things. And my dream was to be specifically Christine Daae in The Phantom of the Opera. I had it all practiced, I could hit all the high notes, and I just told myself, I won't make it on Broadway because I'm too short and nobody's gonna hire me because of that. But that still didn't keep me from getting on stage and doing things. Fast forward to my worst nightmare on stage, where I was playing a part across from my friend Angela, and she was reading her lines. I was supposed to speak after her, and I realized with shock and alarm that I had no idea what I was supposed to say. My lines were completely gone. I did not have a clue what came next. I was looking at her with sheer panic, like, Angela, please help me. I don't know how you're going to help me because I can't do this on stage right now. There's a full audience. And at the very last word of her very last sentence, all of my lines came flooding back to me. I am not a religious person by nature, but I swear to God, that was a miracle that happened that day. It was incredible. Now for me, I was a high school student on a stage. If I had forgotten my lines and someone had to call them to me, it wouldn't be an emergency. No one would think less of me as a person. I was 16, 17 for crying out loud. But what if I wasn't a high school student? What if I was a super high-powered thought leader like Simon Sinek? He's a very, very famous, very popular person known for finding your why and all of these leaders eat last, all of these really great things. And I love Simon. He's like, I don't want to say my brother from another mother because it's not a phrase I use and it doesn't feel like me, but we're kindred spirits, I would say. Now, he had been lined up to give this talk, and he had practiced this talk and presented this talk thousands upon thousands of times. He knew it inside and out. He got invited to speak at this very large event that was make or break. If you do well at this event, you're pretty much set as a speaker for the rest of your life. And if you don't do well at this event, it's the end of your career. You might as well just stop trying. But no big deal. He's done this thousands of times, right? He gets on stage, he's giving his presentation, and in the middle of his presentation, same exact thing. His mind goes completely blank. He has no idea where he is in his presentation, but he's a professional speaker, and so he knows what to do in that moment. You just go quiet, and it'll come back to you. So he went quiet and waited and started panicking, and his heart started beating faster, and his palms started getting really sweaty, and he was kind of freaking out because he has to be successful at this. And then he did the unthinkable, the thing that you're not supposed to do. He turned to his audience and he said, hey, do you ever have those moments where just sheer panic sets in and your heart starts racing and your palms get sweaty? And they're like, yeah. He goes, that's happening to me right now. And he said, I'm so glad that it is because it makes me feel alive. And the audience erupted. They loved it. They loved that moment of connection with him more than they loved the entire rest of his speech. So what a way to connect with your audience. You don't have to have it perfect. In fact, after he said that, he said, okay, somebody please remind me where I was at and we'll keep going. And then he picked up and he was fine. But it's those moments of connection and being together as people that make things memorable. Now, I love Simon and everything he says is like gold to me, but not everybody feels that way. Some people feel that Simon's work is missing a lot of key components and it's headed in the wrong direction. But that's fine, because you can't please everyone all the time. And if you are trying to do that, you are not finding the people that you should be speaking to because you're trying to speak to everybody. Seth Godin is a really big marketing guru, and he puts out a lot of books on the subject. And that's his thing. People like us do things like this. You cannot please everyone. And I really like this quote. The goal of the smallest viable audience is to find people who will understand you and who will fall in love with where you hope to take them. Loving you is a way of expressing themselves. Becoming part of your movement is an expression of who they are. And I think that's a key piece that we miss because we work in these office environments and we think that everybody needs to be on board and on the same page. And that's true, but that doesn't mean that your message is meant to go to everyone. Maybe it's only meant to go to key players on your team. Maybe you only need to connect with leadership. Maybe you only need to connect with IT. Maybe the things that you believe aren't the things that your office believes, but you think that they should, and that message becomes more important. Not to say everyone has to be on your side all the time. So don't feel like your message is perfect only when it reaches everybody, because it's not likely going to. So I also want to take some time to reflect on a time where something went wrong for you. I've shared mine. I've shared Simon Sinek. I'm sure he won't mind. He's very famous and he won't even notice. But maybe what was the time that went wrong for you? And what emotions were coming up in that moment? Was it fear? Was it panic? Was it shame? Was it embarrassment? What were those feelings? But then what did it teach you for next time? Because there's a lesson in everything. So if anyone's willing to share, that would be very vulnerable and amazing. Or if you prefer, we can pair and share. So do we have any brave volunteers? And I'll say going once, going twice, 3 times. Okay, cool. Let's pair and share because that's a much quieter experience. So we'll do another 5 minutes. We'll do 2.5 and then swap in 2.5. Let's bring it on back. Oh God, no. I should not have divulged the Phantom of the Opera because now I'm getting requests. You guys are wonderful conversationalists. Does anybody have anything they want to share? It's totally fine if you don't, because I'm also trying to be mindful of time and ice cream on the terrace after this. I will probably do that myself. Yeah.
I was making a closing announcement at my part-time job, and I had recently switched jobs and actually was at the YMCA, and I was like, "Thank you for visiting the Barnes and Noble. Have a good night." And that's, and of course, I was extremely embarrassed, and I've been making closing announcements. I was telling Rachel I've been making closing announcements for 15 years, and I'm so used to it. So I was got on the loudspeaker, all confident and stuff, and then in that moment, forgot where I was.
Oh, isn't it fun when autopilot takes over? You should be saying YMCA, but Barnes & Noble comes out. It's like when you're talking to someone on the phone and it's a complete work person, not a relative, and you're like, I love you. Okay, we need to be mindful, and just because something is routine doesn't mean we don't need to pay attention to it. So thank you for sharing. That was absolutely wonderful. Anybody else? Yeah.
So I'm here. I'm here that. So I work with the school business, right? And there's a lot of different technologies in various rooms. So you have to be pretty well versed with all of that, like hosting hybrid meetings, presentations, that sort of thing. So last fall I was hosting a lunch and learn with MSBA students, so Masters in Business Analytics students that I work closely with. And it was a virtual speaker, high level from Associated Bank, chief of data analytics, right? And I'm the host of this, and all the students are there, and they've got their sandwiches and they're ready, and it's had all the tech set up, and then there was this feedback in the room, and it just kept happening. And I was like, what is going on? And I didn't have any support in the room. I was like, what is happening? And I felt so embarrassed in that moment. Embarrassed because I knew the virtual speaker was not having the best. They could hear her, and she's like, okay, we're gonna delay. And I was waited because of the tech, and I was like, okay, maybe 5 minutes, and then still couldn't figure it out. Right? So she got started, and we just kind of just went with the bad audio. And of course, in my introduction of her and the other panelists, I just completely went through it. I was so embarrassed about what was happening in the room. Went through it so quick, stuttering. I was just I'm embarrassed in front of these students and my professional here. So then I had some colleagues come in, faculty that were watching that, and the director of the program simply goes over to the iPad that we were using as the camera in the room and hits mute, right? And it fixed the whole audio. And then it went well for the last half hour.
Right.
But anyway, so then what I learned from that, my takeaway is that the following events, right, for the year that I hosted had something to do with setting up, is I was over prepared, right?
Mm-hmm.
Followed up with the IT resources in the school, made sure I got practice with every single system at every room that I needed. And so now it's okay, so now I've got it and I know what to do. But lesson would be prepared next time.
Yeah, and it's especially if it's something that you do on a routine basis, you're I know how to run tech, I know how to run these meetings, and then when something weird happens, it's I covered all my bases, what's going on? And just to have somebody hit mute and you go, oh my God. Not everything's going to go perfect all the time, and we know that. Again, learning things and being prepared for next time is great, but sometimes not all advice is good advice. I did a session last year at the Administrative Professionals Conference here in April, and one of the feedback pieces that I got was that I ended the presentation early. I had slated 10 minutes for questions and nobody asked any questions. So I was like, great, enjoy the free 10 minutes. And somebody complained that I ended early. It was also the session right after lunch. So about halfway through the session, I looked around the room and there was a woman in the back corner sleeping. And I was like, okay, that's not a reflection on me. So that's fine. So not every piece of advice or feedback is necessarily you need to improve on something, but there are opportunities to definitely say, okay, cool, I could do this better for next time. Now, in order to get our message really clear, we need to make it practical. I'm going to tell you one of my favorite jokes that I ever learned when I was in the military. And if you know the answer, go ahead and shout it out. How many Marines can you fit into a porta-john? And I know those aren't Marines, that's the best picture I could find. But how many Marines can you fit into a porta-john? Does anybody know? One more. Now, I love this because it says a lot about speaking. A lot of times when we try to get our message across, we like to give context. We want to give all the details. We want to give you so much information because we want to be helpful and we want to be valuable. I attended an online session for imposter syndrome, I think it was, and the lady was very knowledgeable. She was very enthusiastic about the topic. Every slide was full of text. She never stopped for points for reflection or to ask us to contribute to the group because she was so concerned with cramming all of that information into the 1 hour that she had. But what I walked away from that meeting with was, I don't know what I'm supposed to be thinking about right now. She gave me so much information that I don't know what to do with it. I wish she had given 2 or 3 solid points, give us space to reflect, to share our stories with each other, or even just jot it down on a piece of paper. So more is not always better. Now, I recently joined Toastmasters, and if you don't know what that is, it's an organization that focuses on developing you as a professional speaker, but a lot of people use it also for leadership and developing other communication skills and that type of thing. And the very first speech that you do is an icebreaker speech where you introduce yourself, and then they give you speeches on body language and vocal variety. And then you have to pick a speech with a purpose. And they ask you 3 questions in that. What is the most important thing that I want to say? So as you're thinking about the message that you want to craft, there could be 6 different ideas about how to grow the best orchid, but like, what's the one point that you really want to say? Second, and this is really important, why does it matter to my audience? People don't care what you know until they know that you care. If you are there for yourself and to promote yourself and to give a message so that you look good or you get a promotion or whatever, nobody's going to give 2 licks about it. But if you're there to help the team, if you have an idea that's going to grow revenue or make people's lives easier and it means something to them, your message becomes that much more powerful. And the third question, what do I want people to hold in their hearts and minds long after my speech or my comment in the meeting or whatever it is? That lady that talked about imposter syndrome, I have no idea what the one thing she wanted us to walk away with was. And that took away all of the power of the hour of hard work. And when I tell you an hour of presenting up here is hours and hours of creating all of the text and the bullet points and the PowerPoint and practicing it, that's a lot of time that she put in for me to walk away going, I don't know. So it's really important to make sure that your message is clear. Now, we have talked about all of the ways for you to be an absolutely perfect speaker and get your message across, and you're never going to have any issues for as long as you live, right? I can dream. That's not going to happen in all reality. But the next thing we need to do is find opportunities. So a little bit about my story and how I got to this place. I had a couple of things going for me right off the bat. Stubborn redhead, check. Join the military and learn how to absolutely scream at top volume, but only when asked to. Check. From there, my life took a break for a couple of years, and that was when I was in North Carolina. I worked a few jobs, I ended up at a restaurant, and then I met my ex-husband, and we moved to California. This was a great opportunity for me because I got to start over as a brand new human. I didn't know anybody. All of the things that I was trying to run away from in my life in North Carolina, I could just hit the reset button. I started volunteering with an organization, Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, and we provided financial assistance to service members in need. And this could be anything from, I spent too much money on a phone app this month and I can't pay my bills. And we go, okay, you're dumb, but here's some money and you have to pay it back. The saddest story I think I ever got was a service member came in and his parents in a completely different state died in a house fire. And he had to go home and set up the funeral and all of that. So that was really difficult. We did a lot of casework with clients to figure out what exactly is bringing you in, how much money do you need, can you pay it back? At the time I was getting my master's in psychology, and so I was looking at all of the casework we were doing with our clients, and I'm thinking, oh, we could do this a little bit better. I could teach some of these psychology skills to all of our volunteers. It was a volunteer-based organization. So I started running lunch and learns. I'd put something together. I would teach all of our volunteers about it, and they would go forth and be successful. And it was kind of my first foray into, let me lead a group of people and have some kind of message to share. Life took another break for a couple of years, and we moved to Wisconsin. Side note, I never wanted to live in Wisconsin. It looked absolutely dreadfully boring, and I hated the idea of it. But my ex at the time, he grew up in 5-0 town, Oconomowoc, if you don't know what that stands for. And he wanted to go to UW-Madison. I don't think he ever actually went, but that's neither here nor there. So I started over in Wisconsin. I had a temp job where I ran an origami workshop, which was really fun. I ended up at UW-Madison. This is the 4th UW-Madison conference that I've done a presentation at, so I'm super excited to be here. I love it. I've joined Toastmasters, so not only have I done speeches at the Toastmaster meetings that we have, they held a convention last month and they needed speakers, so I volunteered to speak. And there's nothing more nerve-wracking than speaking in front of professional speakers, so that was a fun time. A couple of years after moving to Madison, I saw that Dream Bank hosts all of these really wonderful, inspiring events, and I wanted to speak at one of these events. So I put in a proposal to speak at Dream Bank. They said no. But with all of this other experience under my belt, I asked them again, hey, I want to do a presentation. Here are some of the topics that I have. And they said yes. So I'll be speaking for Dream Bank in August. If you're following their Facebook page, you'll probably see my smiling face there at some point. But also I've had to get a little creative. I go to Artisan Dental for my dental work. I have since I got here. And they run a quarterly wellness series where they put in a bunch of speakers on various topics that have to do with like health and overall wellness and that kind of thing. And so I emailed them and I said, hey, how does this work? I would love to present at one of these wellness series. And so they contacted me, we talked it out, and lo and behold, I get to do something for them in October. So that's really exciting. So there's all kind of weird nooks and crannies of where you can find opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily think of. You may have different things that you want to do. Maybe you want to be heard in your office meetings and seen as a leader and a professional and somebody who has ideas that they can contribute, or literally even just to be heard, and that's totally a thing. Maybe you want to have more of a presence on social media. You run it for work, or you have a side hustle that you're trying to do at home, or whatever the case may be. So how do you want to craft your message for that? Maybe you want to be a book writer and put out publications. Again, this could be personal, professional, whatever it is. Or maybe you just want to have your voice heard at the Thanksgiving table. Whatever it is, there are definitely opportunities that you can take to craft your message and get it there. Now, I know these are not the only spaces for you to add your voice. There could be church communities or other civic outlets or something. And since we have a big, giant collective brain here, I would love for you all to scan that QR code, and hopefully you can scan it without too much issue. And then jot down 1 or 2 places where you would like to add your voice. Because I know something that somebody says is going to spark something in somebody else that they hadn't thought of before. I did this at the Toastmasters convention, and I don't think anyone knew what a QR code was, so thank you so much. I saw in relationships, and that one is very personal to me, so thank you for whoever shared that. HOA, policy making, family. Town halls, campus leadership. With athletes that I coach, nice. These are great. I can pull this up after the presentation, but if you want to take a quick screenshot now before I move on, please do so. Cool. All right, now let's talk about the connection piece, because again, we cannot do this alone. Who will support your journey? I break these into 2 categories of people: cheerleaders and champions. Cheerleaders are the ones that are going to go, yes, you've got this, you absolutely can do it, I support you. They're going to celebrate every win with you. Champions are the people that are going to advocate on your behalf. They're going to recommend you for a position or a role. They're going to say, hey, my daughter just, this wasn't me, this was my friend, I was just saying that. My daughter just wrote a book. This woman was on an airplane. She sold her daughter's book on an airplane to her seatmate. That is a champion, someone who will go out and help you do the work and put you in places where you wouldn't otherwise be seen. Who's going to give you honest feedback? My ex always hated it when I would talk to people about our relationship problems. They were people that I trusted, but he thought, oh, they're just people who are going to agree with you and tell you that I'm a jerk. No, these are people that are going to tell me if I'm being a jerk, so that's why I'm talking to them. You want people who are going to be honest with you. Not necessarily rude or mean or any of those things, but people who are being kind by telling you the truth. And who do you have in your network that can help? Prioritize connection. This is huge. I'm trying to do more targeted networking in who I speak to instead of just kind of that spray and pray. If I talk to everybody, something will land. Who do I really need to talk to? And I recently got advice. Know what you're asking for. If somebody says, how can I help you? And your answer is, I don't know, they're not likely to be able to help you. But to say, hey, I need somebody who can write a review for my book on Amazon. Could you do that for me? Know specifically what you're asking for. And if they can't do that, they probably know somebody who can. So just some final tips for you guys. Your voice has value that the world needs. Every single one of you has a message, and even if it's the same message as mine, you're going to say it very differently and it's going to land with different people. So don't feel like because 20 other people are doing it that you don't have to speak up. Your voice has value. Be passionate about your work. The worst thing in the world is to have a presenter that's up here and talking and let me just give you my ideas and then I can go home at the end of the day. Really believe in what you're saying. Because if you're passionate and excited about it, so many more people are going to buy into that message. And don't be afraid to reach out to others. The way that I've gotten a lot of these speaking gigs is literally just being brave and putting myself out there and being okay with being told no. Because you never know who's going to say yes. And maybe all those no's were something that I didn't actually want to do in spaces that I didn't actually want to be in. But I am now in a space that I actually want to be in, talking to people that I enjoy talking with. So don't be afraid to reach out. I appreciate you guys so much. If you have questions or specific things that you want to talk about, I will be here. You can come grab my email address or ask me whatever questions you want. But I know it's ice cream time. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.